Guys, welcome to chapter 2. We are going to get started with section 1 here. But chapter 2, we're going to cover economic systems, the different types of systems that different countries use to organize their economy. So, a few learning targets here are sort of main ideas. We're going to talk about 3 key economic questions that all societies must answer, and how they answer those questions really determines what kind of economic system they will have. We'll talk a little bit about societal values and how they determine how a country answers those questions. And then finally, we'll look at the characteristics of a traditional economy. All right, guys, so we will quickly flip through your section 1 vocabulary. Again, this is going to be available to you on Schoology. Please be sure before watching the rest of the lecture that you have an understanding of these terms, and let me know if there's anything that isn't clear to you. So this chapter is all about economic systems, which is just really the structure of methods and principles that a society uses to distribute their goods and services. So how do we set up the economy? That's our economic system, okay? We'll talk a little bit about factor payments, which are more or less your paycheck, the money that you receive for supplying the factors of production. Remember, one of those factors of production is labor. So when you provide your labor to some business, wherever you work, you receive money for that labor. That's your factor payment. We'll talk about profit and what role that plays in an economy, whether that's like valued or not. But profit would just be the amount of money that a business receives in excess of their expenses. So once all their payments are made, what's left at the end of the day. Also talk about safety nets, which are government programs that help protect people, supply them with basic needs like food, so on and so forth. Additionally, we'll look at the standard of living in different economic systems. That's just the level of prosperity. We'll talk about innovation, which is the process of bringing new methods, new products, new technology, new ideas into use in an economy. And then finally, as I mentioned in the learning targets, we're going to talk today about a traditional economy, which is an economic system that relies on customs and rituals to decide the answers to their 3 key economic questions. All right, so kind of general, all-encompassing question here for section 1 is what goals and values affect how a society answers the 3 key economic questions. So each society is guided by their economic system, which affects the way in which business operates within the society, as well as the way in which business operates with other societies, right? We're a very global world, and so there's a lot of like trading goods and services between different countries who have different types of economic systems. So a society's values, such as tradition or freedom, they guide the way in which we answer the key economic questions, which I am going to give you in just a second. So here they are, 3 key economic questions. What goods and services are we going to produce? Are we going to produce lots of military goods, or are we going to really focus on consumers? It's a guns or butter decision, really, right? What goods and services should we use our resources for? What services and goods should we produce, right? So each society needs to decide what to produce in order to satisfy the needs and or wants of their people. The second question is, how should these goods and services be produced? So, as a society, they need to decide how we're going to actually make these goods. how are we going to use our land, labor, and capital? So are we going to force people to work? Are we going to make that a choice? Right? You can see if a society, if their core value is freedom, you could see how they might answer that question a little bit differently than a society that doesn't put freedom at the top of their values list, right? Because in a society that values freedom, you're probably going to give workers a choice, more or less, to work or not. Where in different economic systems, people might be kind of forced into a job. And then the last question is, who consumes these goods? So this is largely determined by how societies distribute income through factor payments, so like paychecks and profits. Societies can determine who will be the consumers of goods, right? So if everyone takes home exactly the same paycheck, everyone has the same buying power. They can purchase the same things, right? Now, in the United States, we don't allocate income that way, right? You may get paid one day way more than I do, right? Or right now, I get paid more than you do, right? So we're all taking home different paychecks, and that determines what we can buy, right? So someone who's making a lot more money than me has a lot more buying power. They can get a lot more, right, than I can because I have less money. So how we distribute income determines really who can consume goods and services because it's all about what you can afford. So the how portion of this question, how do we produce something? How do we produce goods and services? Really, that goes back to how we use our factors of production. So we have two different models here. You have a society that is more traditional, which we're going to talk about, that relies on hand tools to get the job done. They can use 1 acre of land, 56 worker hours, and hand tools as their capital. And with that, they get 15 bushels of wheat. Where if a society determines that, like, we're going to pump money into agriculture, right, we're going to be efficient, we're going to have the best technology, using that same acre of land, they can have less than 3 worker hours, big machinery, and produce even more bushels of wheat with less labor. So a society combines their factor resources to determine like what that economic system is going to look like, how industries within that system are going to operate, so on and so forth. So society answers the 3 economic questions based on the importance that they attach to various economic goals. So resources are always scarce, and so societies are going to try and maximize what they can produce with the resources that they have available to them. If a society can accurately assess what to produce with the resources that are available to them, they can increase their economic efficiency. So in the last slide, when I showed you we only need 3 workers to produce more wheat because we have capital, that technology allows us to better allocate our resources, our other factors of production, and increase efficiency. Another economic goal would be freedom and security. Some societies do limit the amount of economic freedoms that its people have. In the United States, we do face some limitations, right? There's limitations on like certain products. So for example, if you have ever bought like Sudafed, like cold medicine from the pharmacy. There's like limitations to buying that. Like you can only buy a certain quantity, you have to be a certain age, so on and so forth. So there are some limitations, but in general, we enjoy a large amount of economic freedom, right? We can decide what job we want to do, how we want to spend our money, so on and so forth. So economic systems, though, also strive to achieve a certain degree of economic security. So we want to reassure people that the goods and services that they need, they can count on being there. They can count on receiving, right? So food, for example, is a need, right? We all need to eat. And so if our society values economic security, we're going to try and meet the basic needs of our people. So if someone doesn't have enough income to support their family and provide food for their family, they can apply for government assistance, right? And they're going to receive payments from the government or a budget of sorts that they can use towards food for their family. Another economic goal would be equity. Okay. Now, equity is defined differently in different societies. So, equity in the United States might mean like equal work deserves equal pay. People are still fighting to make sure that men and women make the same amount of money for the same job, right? So that might be what our ideal of equity looks like in the United States, right? But in other countries, they may not define equity the same, right? Maybe in other societies they expect women to stay at home and the men are out of the home working, but equity is more about like everyone, every family getting the same factor payment, the same income every month, right? So equity can mean different things to different societies. But each society must decide how to divide its economic pie, more or less. All right, so some examples of economic goals that I've touched on: efficiency, freedom, security, equity, and then the last one that I haven't talked about is growth. So quickly, before we talk about economic growth, there are some additional economic goals for certain societies, right? Maybe an economic goal is environmental protection. Like we need to create an economy that is healthy for this earth, right? Or maybe an economic goal is full unemployment. Like we want the unemployment, or full employment rather. We want the unemployment rate like so low. Or we want to protect certain industries, right? Now, every society has to prioritize their economic goals because you can't have complete efficiency, complete freedom, complete security, so on and so forth. You need to prioritize like what is the main thing that we want to ensure in our economic system, right? Every choice comes with some sort of trade-off. So if you have 100% economic freedom, that may mean that you don't really have economic security because maybe people are free to make as much money as they want and there's no taxation, and so we can't help out, the government can't help out people that can't make money, right? Or don't make enough money. So every economic goal has trade-offs, right? So they have to list them in the order of importance. What I want to ask you is, how do you think the United States prioritizes their economic goals? how would you rank them? As a reminder from the last slide, your 5 core economic goals that we talked about were equity, efficiency, growth, freedom, and security. So how would you rank, how do you think the United States ranks those goals? So I said I was going to touch on economic growth. Okay, a society can strive for economic growth. A nation's economy must grow so that it can provide jobs for the new people joining the workforce. So we have far more working age people today than we did 100 years ago. So our economy needs to grow in order to provide jobs for those people and really in order to meet the needs of a growing population. Additionally, a nation strives, more often than not, there's maybe exceptions, but more often than not, a nation is striving to improve its standard of living. We want people to be well off, right? We want people to do well. We want people to not have to live in tents or be homeless, right? We want to improve our standard of living. And innovation plays a huge role in growing the economy. Okay, because if we can like develop new technologies and better allocate our resources, we can meet the needs and wants of more and more people, and we just see economic growth. And ultimately, economic growth will hopefully result in a higher standard of living for everyone in that country. Now, the last learning target was a traditional economy. So the oldest and the simplest economic system is known as a traditional economy. A traditional economy really relies on habits and customs and rituals, right? This is how we've always done it. And it really revolves around the family. In a traditional economy, it's more about meeting the basic needs of your family, and there's really little room for innovation or change, nor is there necessarily a desire for innovation and change. Traditional economies are usually found in communities that are smaller and close, and oftentimes these communities work together to support their entire community rather than just themselves or their immediate family. So one family may close, and one family may work in agriculture and grow crops to help feed the people of the community, right? So on and so forth. So these small communities often sort of divide and conquer so that they can meet the basic needs of their people. But there is little desire or need for economic growth, and thus there's lack of innovation, right? Traditional economies look much, much different than the United States does today, because they're, kind of stuck in the same sort of customs that have been in place for hundreds of years. And that's okay, because traditional economies can adequately meet the needs of their people as well. It's all about values, right? What do you value? Do you value custom more than growth? So on and so forth. All right, that wraps up this section. See you next time in 2.2.